Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local.
Okay, so my item today is about this kind of quirky little toggle that appeared at the top of the Google app on my iPhone, which apparently was announced. I missed the announcement, a month or so ago, and they're rolling it out just, I guess, as they do, sort of phased rollout. And so I'm not going to hold it up in front of the camera, but we'll have it in the newsletter. There's a little sort of button at the very top above the search bar, at the very visible part of the page, and it defaults to search. You're on google.com, it shows search. You touch it and it sends you over to a Gemini screen, so the Gemini experience, which you have to be, I think, opted into. There's two levels. There's free and paid now, and I think you have to be opted in to use Gemini at all. Maybe not. No, because you don't, because Bard was anyway, blah blah blah. So this toggle is kind of interesting because I don't think it's particularly useful. I mean, the sort of implied invitation is you're going to do a search for, divorce lawyers in Atlanta, Georgia, or best restaurants in Dublin, Ireland, or whatever it is. Is a heat pump going to save me money, or whatever the question is, and you're going to compare them. You're going to do the Google result, and you're going to then switch over to Gemini and do the same thing. Or at least you're going to be using Gemini so much that you want it to be easily accessible, and that's one doorway into it. But so in doing some of those searches, it was quite interesting to see the different user experience. And Google.com gives you a lot more information. I mean, just an enormous amount of information. Images and packs, and people also ask, and discussion forums, everything. It's just an enormous trove of information, which is part of the problem. And then if you go over to Gemini and do the same thing, it's a much, it's sort of reminiscent of the 10 blue links. You get a list. In some cases, you get some images, but it's much cleaner. Although you can't totally trust it, right? You don't have complete confidence that this is entirely reliable, except in certain cases, Google is using Google Hotels plugin, Google Flights, or Google Maps, and so it's essentially the same information. I think what's really going on here is that this is just a big PR move. Google isn't really doing anything functionally with this. It's really just to expose users to Gemini. I mean, on some of these user videos that we're watching, they're putting Gemini on the homepage. They're really pushing Gemini. And I think that's partly about, trying to reclaim mindshare around AI from ChatGPT, which is sort of the consumer brand right now around AI search or AI tools. And Google is also doing this enormous PR, offensive around AI, just announcements every week, product announcements, adding Gemini to Workspace and this new open source version of Gemini, Gemma. I mean, it's an enormous PR push that's going on right now as Google sort of tries to associate in the consumer mind AI with its own products. And because of its centrality to everybody's internet usage, it may be successful. And this sort of toggle is a sort of metaphor for all of that. And I thought that was interesting. And but in terms of the UI, I generally prefer the more Spartan Gemini UI. But you can't kind of completely trust it.
It strikes me as a little bit like the badges on packaging that's been reworked. Like now with X, it's like Google. Now
right,
with AI,
exactly.
It's just that kind of almost a performance of packaging as opposed to a product that someone might actually switch to. So
here's the tagline: now our search results explicitly hallucinate.
Well, I mean, ChatGPT the other day, there was a much publicized sort of, it's not an outage exactly, but there was some bug in ChatGPT and people were going crazy because it was, sort of spewing all this. I didn't experience it, so I don't know exactly what was going on, but spewing all this kind of weird stuff and nonsense. And so, the risk of inaccuracy or hallucination is very real. I mean, my wife and I have been doing some financial exercises, and what I use Gemini and ChatGPT, and sometimes Anthropic and sometimes Perplexity, but mostly Gemini and ChatGPT to check calculations. So I'll do different sort of hypotheticals in both to see if they're consistent, which is like what you're describing with the brand, the brand discovery search. And that's how I'm checking the accuracy of results in some of these instances, is rather than trying to second guess, I just take the same query and plug it into Gemini and then see what comes out. And in some of these cases, the answers are quite different, which is really strange and interesting. But in others, they're consistent, and so that gives me comfort when I see that.
You just hope they're not all hallucinating the exact.
It's really hard. Probably not. Probably not. It's like future value of money stuff, which is, based on equations. I mean, this is what financial planners do, is that they have software that calculates the future value. They run scenarios. And so I was trying to do some of that stuff on these, and they're quite good in most cases. But I have more confidence in ChatGPT than I do in Gemini. But we'll see if that changes over time. But all right, well, I guess that's all there is to say about that. I mean, I find it really interesting that Google is making such a big push under the guise of product announcements. It's a PR strategy, right? They're just pushing and pushing. Gemini 1.5, Gemini and Workspace. It's all about PR.
Gemini Pro.
Yeah. So one counter to that, which I thought was interesting, is originally when they brought out Google Maps AI, which one presumes is Gemini, it was a very bold, right at the first time you logged into the app, right under the map, it was very big and bold. And then last week it disappeared, and I thought, this last few days, disappeared, and I thought, where did it go? And did I somehow unsubscribe? Is the experiment over? And I realized what they had done is they had relegated it to when you touch the query field, it then is just one of the drop-down choices in the query field. So there they've deprecated its visibility significantly over the past week. So again, I don't know why. And
that was because of your criticism, Mike, I think.
It very well could be.
Mike says this isn't ready for prime time.
Yeah, well, no Google product is ever ready for prime time, right? And the problem with AI is it needs to learn what people are looking for to be able to, at least, I think Google wants to understand what the queries are going to be, but it's even very, very hard to find now, which is just an interesting contrast to the Google app.
Thanks for joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.